The strangest moments in life never arrive with a warning. Ethan Carter would remember that thought for the rest of his life. At exactly 2:03 a.m., while rain hammered against the windows of his small house near the edge of Pine Hollow Forest, someone knocked on his front door. The sound was soft. 3 slow taps, then silence. Ethan looked up from the old repair manual resting on his lap. The television was muted. A desk lamp cast a warm circle of light across the living room. Outside, the storm had been growing stronger for hours. Wind pushed branches against the siding. Rainwater streamed down the glass. Nobody visited at this hour. Nobody. He checked the clock again. 2:03 a.m. Another knock followed. 3 taps. Calm. Deliberate. Ethan frowned. Pine Hollow was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone. If somebody needed help, they usually called first. He set the manual aside and stood. The wooden floor creaked beneath his feet. For a moment he simply listened. The house felt unusually quiet despite the storm. Even the refrigerator hum seemed distant. Then another knock came, this time slightly louder. Ethan walked toward the door. His hand paused near the lock. Something felt strange. Not dangerous, just wrong. Like finding a photograph in your house that you did not remember taking. He glanced through the peephole. At first he thought nobody was there. Rain blurred everything. Then a figure stepped into view. A woman. She stood motionless beneath the porch light. Ethan blinked. Her appearance made no sense. Her clothing looked unfamiliar, almost elegant despite being soaked by rain. Long silver strands of hair clung to her shoulders. Her skin appeared faintly blue-green beneath the yellow porch light. Ethan pulled back from the door. "What?" he whispered. Maybe it was the lighting. Maybe he was tired. Maybe the storm was playing tricks on his eyes. He looked again. The woman remained there, waiting. She did not pound on the door. She did not call out. She simply stood in the rain. Ethan unlocked the deadbolt. The door opened slowly. Cold air rushed into the house immediately. Rain hissed against the porch roof. For a moment neither spoke. The woman looked younger than he expected, perhaps late 20s. Her eyes reflected the porch light with an unusual silver shimmer. Tiny droplets of water ran across skin that was unmistakably turquoise. Not painted, not artificial. Real. Ethan stared. The woman stared back. Then she raised her hands slightly to show she meant no harm. Her voice was soft, careful, almost trembling. "Do not be afraid." Ethan had absolutely no idea how to respond to that sentence. The woman swallowed. "I need your help." The words sounded perfectly English, clear, natural. Yet everything else about her felt impossible. Ethan glanced beyond her. Empty road, empty yard, dark forest. No vehicle, no explanation, nothing. "Who are you?" he asked. The woman looked over her shoulder toward the distant tree line. Fear flickered across her face. Real fear. Not the kind someone pretended to feel. The kind that lived deep behind the eyes. She looked back at Ethan. "Please." Her voice dropped even lower. "There is not much time." Thunder rolled across the sky. The porch light flickered. For a fraction of a second, Ethan noticed something attached to her wrist beneath her sleeve. A metallic device emitting a faint blue glow. Not a phone. Not anything he recognized. The light vanished as quickly as it appeared. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. Every reasonable instinct told him to close the door and call someone. Yet another part of him noticed details that did not fit a threat. She was shivering, exhausted. Rain soaked through her clothing. Her breathing was uneven. Whatever had brought her here, she looked more desperate than dangerous. The woman glanced toward the forest again. Her expression tightened. Ethan followed her gaze. For a brief moment he thought he saw a faint light moving between the trees. Then it disappeared. Perhaps lightning. Perhaps imagination. The woman stepped backward instinctively. Fear returned to her eyes. "Please," she repeated. "I came very far to find you." Ethan froze. "Find me?" She nodded. Ethan Carter. The sound of his own name hit harder than the storm. He never remembered telling her who he was. The woman seemed to realize what she had revealed. Silence stretched between them. Rain continued falling. Wind moved through the trees. Somewhere far beyond the forest, thunder echoed across the sleeping town. Ethan looked at the stranger standing beneath his porch light, then at the dark woods behind her. Nothing about this night made sense anymore. And deep inside, he already knew that opening the door was about to change everything. For several seconds, Ethan Carter simply stood there with one hand still resting on the edge of the door. Rain continued falling beyond the porch. Water dripped from the woman's silver hair onto the wooden floorboards. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the hills surrounding Pine Hollow. Neither of them moved. Ethan could not stop thinking about one thing. She knew his name, not guessed it, not recognized it from a mailbox. She had said it with certainty. The woman seemed to realize how unsettling that was. Her eyes lowered briefly. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "I should have explained differently." Ethan folded his arms. That would be a good start. Another flash of lightning illuminated the yard. For a brief moment, the forest beyond the road appeared almost white. Then darkness returned. The woman glanced toward the trees again. Ethan noticed the movement immediately. Whatever frightened her was out there, not inside his house. That detail mattered. "Come inside," he finally said. The words surprised even him. The woman hesitated. "You trust me?" Ethan looked at her soaked clothing, exhausted expression, and trembling hands. "Not yet." He stepped aside. But standing in a thunderstorm is not helping either. Relief crossed her face. Genuine relief. She entered carefully, almost as though she feared touching anything. Ethan closed the door behind her. The storm became a distant roar. Warm air filled the room. The woman remained near the entrance. Her eyes moved slowly across the living room. The couch, the bookshelves, the lamp, family photographs resting on a nearby table. She studied everything with quiet fascination. Ethan noticed something unusual. She was not looking at expensive objects or technology. She kept returning to the photographs. Pictures of birthdays, fishing trips, holiday gatherings, ordinary moments. "You have many family records," she said softly. Ethan glanced toward the photos. "Most people just call them pictures." She walked closer to one frame, a photograph of Ethan and his parents taken years earlier beside a lake. Her expression softened. "You keep memories visible. Does that sound strange?" The woman looked toward him. "Where I come from, memories are stored differently." Ethan leaned against the kitchen counter. "And where exactly is that?" For the first time, uncertainty appeared in her eyes. She opened her mouth, then stopped. Whatever answer she wanted to give, she clearly did not trust herself to say it yet. Instead, she lowered her gaze toward the metallic device attached to her wrist. The faint blue glow returned. Small symbols moved across its surface. Ethan watched carefully. The device looked impossibly advanced. Sleek, seamless, almost grown rather than manufactured. Suddenly it emitted a soft tone. The woman immediately tensed. Her head turned toward the nearest window. "No," she whispered. Ethan straightened. "What happened?" The blue light brightened. Symbols moved faster. The woman touched the device and the display vanished instantly. Her breathing became uneven. "They are closer." Ethan frowned. "Who?" She looked directly at him. "I cannot explain yet." "You keep saying that. Because if I explain incorrectly, you may not believe anything afterward." Ethan stared at her. That answer was frustratingly honest. Before he could respond, another strange sound echoed through the room. A faint burst of static. Both turned toward the kitchen. The old radio sitting beside the refrigerator had activated by itself. Ethan walked over. The device had not worked properly in months. Yet now it crackled with intermittent signals. Strange tones emerged through the speaker. High, rhythmic, almost musical. The woman froze completely. That should not be happening. Ethan adjusted the volume. "You recognize it?" She nodded slowly. Yes. The signal continued for several seconds before abruptly stopping. Silence returned. Ethan looked at the radio, then at her wrist device, then back at the radio. Tell me that is a coincidence. The woman did not answer. That was answer enough. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. 2 hours ago, his biggest concern had been fixing a leaking section of roof before winter. Now an unknown woman with turquoise skin was standing in his living room while broken electronics responded to her presence. Reality was becoming difficult to negotiate. The woman stepped closer to the photographs again. Her attention settled on another image. Ethan as a child sitting beside his grandfather. She studied it carefully. He was important to you. Ethan nodded. Very. Something changed in her expression. Recognition. Not of the photograph itself. Of the name. Of the family. Your grandfather, she said quietly. Thomas Carter. Ethan felt a chill despite the warm room. How do you know that name? The woman looked at him for a long moment. Outside, the storm intensified. Rain struck the windows. Wind moved through the trees. Somewhere beyond Pine Hollow, hidden in the darkness, a faint blue light appeared briefly between the forest branches. The woman saw it. Her face lost all color. Then she looked back at Ethan. Because, she whispered, everything started with him. The room felt smaller after those words. Everything started with him. Ethan Carter stared at the woman as thunder rolled across the night sky. His grandfather had been gone for nearly 12 years. Thomas Carter had spent most of his life in Pine Hollow. He repaired engines, volunteered at community events, and told stories nobody could ever verify. Stories about strange lights over the mountains. Stories about unusual visitors passing through town decades ago. Most people treated them as harmless tales from an imaginative old man. Ethan included. Yet the woman standing in his living room had spoken his grandfather's name with complete certainty. Explain that, Ethan said. The woman hesitated. I will. Her eyes drifted toward the dark window again. But first we need to know if we are safe. Ethan followed her gaze. Rainwater slid down the glass in silver streams. Beyond the backyard stood a line of pine trees swaying in the wind. Nothing looked unusual. Yet he remembered the brief blue light he had seen moments earlier. A faint glow moving among the trees. What exactly are we hiding from? Ethan asked. The woman opened her mouth to answer. Before she could speak, every light in the house suddenly dimmed. The lamp flickered. The kitchen lights blinked twice. Then everything returned to normal. Silence followed. Even the woman seemed surprised. She looked down at the device attached to her wrist. Symbols raced across its surface. Faster than before. That is not good, she whispered. Ethan was growing tired of hearing that phrase. You keep saying things are not good without explaining why. The woman took a slow breath. Because I have never expected events to unfold this quickly. The old radio crackled again. Static burst from the speaker. Then a voice emerged. Not words. Just fragmented sounds hidden beneath layers of interference. Ethan walked toward it. The signal lasted only 3 seconds before disappearing entirely. The radio fell silent once more. That is the third time, Ethan said. What is causing it? The woman remained motionless. The same thing that brought me here. Lightning flashed outside. For an instant, the entire living room turned white. Ethan noticed something on the far side of the yard. A small light, suspended several feet above the ground near the edge of the forest. He stepped closer to the window. The light vanished immediately. You saw it too? The woman asked quietly. Ethan nodded. What is it? A search signal. His stomach tightened. Searching for what? This time she answered immediately. Me. The honesty surprised him. She stepped closer to the window but stayed behind the curtain. I hoped I had more time. Ethan crossed his arms. Then start talking. For several seconds she remained silent. Rain tapped against the roof. Wind moved through the trees. Finally she looked directly at him. My name is Lyra. Ethan nodded slowly. It was the first real piece of information she had offered. Lyra. She seemed relieved to finally say it aloud. I traveled a very long distance to find this place. How long? Long enough that your measurements would be difficult to explain. Ethan almost laughed. That is not an answer. A faint smile appeared on her face for the first time. I know. The expression vanished quickly. But I can tell you this. I came because of your family. Ethan glanced toward the photograph of his grandfather. Thomas Carter? Lyra nodded. He helped someone many years ago. Who? Someone my people never forgot. Ethan stared at her. The statement sounded impossible. Yet everything tonight had already crossed the boundary of impossible. Lyra slowly approached the family photographs again. Her gaze settled on the image of Thomas Carter beside the lake. He was much younger when it happened. When what happened? The event that changed everything. Ethan waited. Lyra reached toward the photograph but stopped just short of touching it. My people preserve memories differently than humans. We remember moments, choices, acts of kindness. Ethan frowned. You are telling me my grandfather helped an alien? Lyra met his eyes. Yes. The answer arrived so calmly that it somehow felt more believable. Ethan laughed once. Not because it was funny, because he had no idea what else to do. This is insane. I know. You expect me to believe that? No, her voice softened. I expect you to see the evidence yourself. Before Ethan could respond, a sharp tone emerged from Lyra's wrist device. The blue light brightened dramatically. Symbols flooded the display. Lyra's expression changed immediately. Fear returned. Real fear. What happened? Ethan asked. She looked toward the forest. They found the signal. The lights in the house flickered again. Outside, the rain began slowing. The storm was moving away. Yet the darkness beyond the trees somehow felt heavier than before. Lyra stepped away from the window. We cannot stay here much longer. Ethan looked at her. Who are they? Lyra swallowed. Then she spoke the words that would keep him awake for the rest of his life. The people who never wanted me to reach you. The sentence settled over the room like a cold draft. The people who never wanted me to reach you. Ethan Carter stared at Lyra while the last traces of the storm drifted across the windows. Rain still tapped softly against the glass, but the thunder had moved farther into the mountains. The silence inside the house felt heavier than the weather outside. Why? Ethan finally asked. Why would anyone care if you found me? Lyra looked toward the family photographs again. Her eyes stopped on the image of Thomas Carter. Because they believed some stories should remain forgotten. Ethan sighed. That is still not an answer. I know. She seemed frustrated with herself. Not because she was hiding information, because she was trying to explain something far larger than either of them could fit into a conversation. The blue light on her wrist device dimmed slightly. Whatever had triggered the alert seemed more distant now. At least for the moment. Lyra moved toward the couch and sat carefully on the edge of the cushion. Everything she did carried a strange mixture of confidence and caution, as though she understood advanced technologies but remained fascinated by ordinary furniture. Ethan sat across from her. For the first time since opening the door, neither of them seemed ready to leave. Start from the beginning, he said. Lyra nodded slowly. The beginning happened long before either of us were born. Ethan leaned back. I am listening. Lyra folded her hands together. My people once traveled between stars freely. We explored. We studied. We formed friendships with many worlds. Ethan noticed her expression soften slightly as she spoke. She was remembering something she had never personally seen but clearly valued. One of those journeys ended unexpectedly. How? A transport vessel experienced a systems failure above this region. Ethan blinked. Pine Hollow? The mountains nearby. Ethan looked toward the dark window. The idea sounded impossible. Yet impossible had become normal sometime around 2 o'clock in the morning. Lyra continued. The crew survived, but they could not contact home. And my grandfather found them? Not immediately. A faint smile appeared on her face. First he thought they were hikers. Ethan laughed despite himself. That sounded exactly like Thomas Carter. The old man had once rescued 3 tourists who became lost during a fishing trip. He never treated unusual situations as unusual. He simply helped people. He gave them shelter, Lyra continued. Food, supplies, privacy. Ethan looked at the photograph again. Without asking questions? He asked many questions. The smile remained. But he helped first. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. That sounded familiar too. Thomas Carter always believed kindness came before explanations. Lyra's eyes returned to Ethan. The crew never forgot that. So they told future generations? More than that. She hesitated. Your grandfather became part of our historical records. Ethan stared at her. My grandfather? Yes. A mechanic from a town with 1 gas station? Lyra nodded. Because character matters more than status. The room became quiet again. Ethan did not know what to do with that information. He had spent his entire life viewing Thomas Carter as an ordinary man. A good man, but ordinary. The idea that an alien civilization remembered him decades later felt surreal. Why find me? Ethan asked. Lyra looked down briefly. Because history repeated itself. Ethan frowned. What does that mean? Before she could answer, the kitchen lights flickered again. Both looked toward the ceiling. This time the power remained steady. Yet something else happened. A soft tone emerged from the old radio. Not static. Not interference. A single clear note. Then another. Ethan stood and approached it. The display screen, which had been dead for years, now glowed faintly blue. That should not be possible, he muttered. Lyra joined him. Her expression had shifted from concern to curiosity. Symbols appeared briefly across her wrist device. She touched the surface and compared the readings. Interesting. Ethan looked at her. What? The signal is not coming from outside. Then where? Lyra slowly turned toward him. It is responding to you. Ethan laughed once. Absolutely not. I am serious. The radio emitted another tone. Then another. Almost like a sequence. Pattern. Ethan stared at the device. I have never seen that before. Neither have I. Lyra's voice had become quieter. More focused. The fear she carried earlier seemed to be fading. Replaced by something else. Hope. She stepped closer to the radio and listened carefully. I think it is trying to guide us. Ethan folded his arms. Guide us where? Lyra looked toward the northern wall of the house. Beyond it lay miles of forest. Mountains. Abandoned trails. Forgotten places most residents never visited. The blue glow on her wrist device synchronized with the radio for a brief second. Then both lights pulsed together. Lyra slowly lifted her eyes. I think, she said softly, it is showing us where your grandfather went after he met them. By 3:17 a.m., Ethan Carter was driving deeper into the mountains than he had gone in years. The storm had almost completely passed. Thin layers of fog drifted across the narrow road ahead. Water glistened on the pavement beneath the headlights of his aging pickup truck. Pine trees lined both sides of the route like dark walls stretching into the night. Beside him, Lyra sat quietly in the passenger seat. The blue light from her wrist device reflected softly across the dashboard every few seconds. Neither had spoken much during the first 20 minutes. Ethan was still trying to process everything that had happened since the first knock on his door. Lyra seemed focused on the signal guiding them forward. The old radio resting between them continued emitting occasional tones. Somehow, after years of barely functioning, it had become the most mysterious object in his possession. Another sequence of notes emerged from the speaker. Soft, precise. Lyra immediately checked her device. The signal is getting stronger. Ethan kept his eyes on the road. Please tell me that means we are going in the right direction. It does. Good. I am running out of alternative explanations. A faint smile appeared on her face. The tension that had filled the house earlier seemed slightly reduced. For the first time since arriving, she no longer looked like someone being chased. She looked like someone getting closer to an answer. The road eventually narrowed into a gravel path leading toward the northern ridge above Pine Hollow. Ethan recognized the route immediately. Very few people used it anymore. "This leads to the old observatory," he said. Lyra looked toward him. "Observatory? Small research station built decades ago." He shrugged. "Closed years before I was born." The blue light on her wrist device brightened noticeably. "Then that is where we need to go." Ethan felt a strange chill. His grandfather used to mention the observatory occasionally. Not often. Just enough for Ethan to remember the stories. Thomas Carter claimed the scientists there spent more time watching strange lights than stars. Most people assumed he was joking. Now Ethan was not so sure. 15 minutes later, the observatory appeared through the fog. The structure sat atop a rocky ridge overlooking miles of forest. Time had not been kind to it. The main building showed signs of age. Metal railings carried patches of rust. Windows reflected moonlight through layers of dust. Yet the large dome at the center remained surprisingly intact. Ethan parked beside the entrance. The engine fell silent. For a moment neither moved. The observatory looked abandoned, completely lifeless. Then the radio emitted its loudest tone yet. Every light on Lyra's wrist device illuminated simultaneously. Ethan slowly exhaled. Of course it is here. They stepped out into the cold mountain air. The storm clouds were finally breaking apart. Above them, stars filled the sky. Hundreds, thousands, clearer than Ethan had seen in years. Lyra stopped walking and stared upward. Her expression changed instantly. Wonder replaced anxiety. She looked almost emotional. "Beautiful," she whispered. Ethan glanced toward her. "You have never seen stars before?" "Not like this." Her eyes remained fixed on the sky. "Your atmosphere reveals them differently." For a moment they simply stood there beneath the stars. Human and alien. Two strangers connected by a mystery neither fully understood. Then the radio emitted another signal. Reality returned. They approached the observatory entrance. The front doors should have been locked. Instead, one stood slightly open. Ethan exchanged a look with Lyra. "You expecting that?" She shook her head. "No," he pushed the door carefully. The hinges groaned softly. Dust covered most surfaces inside. Old desks remained exactly where workers had left them decades earlier. Filing cabinets lined the walls. Faded charts still hung near observation stations. The entire building felt frozen in time. Yet something was wrong. Electricity flowed through the structure. Not much, just enough. Ethan noticed small indicator lights glowing on equipment that should not have worked anymore. "How is this possible?" he asked. Lyra slowly turned in place, studying the room. "Someone maintained it." Ethan frowned. "Recently?" "No," she touched a nearby control panel. "Automatically." They moved deeper into the building. The radio continued guiding them. Every signal grew stronger. Eventually they reached the central dome. Massive telescope equipment filled the room beneath the curved ceiling. Dust covered everything except one object. A single console near the center appeared completely clean, as if someone had wiped it moments earlier. Ethan stared. That was not like this before. Lyra approached the console slowly. Her wrist device began flashing. Symbols raced across the display faster than Ethan had ever seen. Then something remarkable happened. The dormant observatory awakened. Soft blue light spread across the floor. Ancient screens illuminated around the dome. The telescope above rotated smoothly toward the sky despite decades of abandonment. Ethan stepped backward. The entire room hummed with energy. Light reflected across the walls. Hidden systems activated beneath the structure. Then a final display appeared above the central console. A name. Simple. Clear. Impossible. Thomas Carter. Ethan stopped breathing for a moment. Lyra looked at the glowing letters. Then at Ethan. Neither needed to speak. Whatever secret his grandfather left behind had been waiting here for a very long time. The glowing letters remained suspended above the console. Thomas Carter. Ethan Carter stared at them as though the observatory itself had reached through time and spoken directly to him. The blue light filling the dome reflected across old telescope equipment and dusty walls. Nothing about this place should have been functioning. Nothing about this night should have been possible. Yet here he was, standing inside an abandoned observatory at nearly 4 o'clock in the morning beside an alien woman who somehow knew more about his grandfather than he did. Lyra remained motionless beside the console. Her wrist device pulsed in perfect synchronization with the observatory systems. Every few seconds, new symbols flowed across its surface. "The connection is authentic," she whispered. Ethan glanced toward her. "You can tell that?" Lyra nodded slowly. "This facility recognizes your family line." Ethan laughed quietly, not because anything was funny, because reality continued presenting him with information his brain refused to categorize properly. "My grandfather fixed lawnmowers." Lyra looked at him. "Your grandfather also changed history." Before Ethan could respond, the console illuminated further. Additional text appeared beneath Thomas Carter's name. "Access granted. Welcome, Ethan Carter." A chill traveled down Ethan's spine. The observatory knew his name. Not guessed, not approximated. Knew. The central platform emitted a soft mechanical sound. Hidden compartments opened around the room. Ancient screens activated one after another. Then the telescope above completed its rotation and locked onto a position in the night sky. The dome ceiling partially opened. Stars became visible overhead. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Ethan looked upward instinctively. The sight was breathtaking. Then he noticed something unusual. The telescope was not tracking a star. It was tracking a specific region of empty space. Or what appeared empty. Lyra stepped closer to the main display. "It is beginning." Ethan folded his arms. "What exactly is beginning?" The answer arrived from the observatory itself. A new projection emerged above the console. Light gathered in the center of the room. Shapes formed. Details sharpened. Within seconds, a holographic image stood before them. Ethan stopped breathing. It was his grandfather. Younger than Ethan remembered. Perhaps 40 years old. Wearing the same work jacket visible in dozens of old family photographs. Thomas Carter looked directly toward the recording device. Then he smiled. "Well," the hologram said, "if you are seeing this, something incredible happened." Ethan could not move, could not speak. The voice was identical. Every detail felt real. Lyra watched quietly from beside him. The recording continued. "I never expected anybody from my family to find this place." Thomas chuckled softly. "Honestly, I barely expected anyone to believe me." Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. The hologram walked slowly across the projection field. Behind him appeared images of the observatory decades earlier. Scientists, equipment, strange lights visible beyond the mountains. "You probably have questions," Thomas said. "I certainly did." New images emerged around him. Ethan immediately recognized none of them. Elegant structures, unusual landscapes, star-filled skies unlike anything visible from Earth. "The truth started on a night when I met travelers who needed help." Lyra lowered her eyes. Ethan understood immediately. These were her people. Thomas continued. "They were frightened, lost, far from home." His smile returned. "Turns out that happens no matter which planet you come from." Ethan found himself smiling despite everything. That sounded exactly like his grandfather. The hologram paused. His expression became more serious. "The people I met taught me something important. Most civilizations measure greatness by power. Bigger ships, better technology, more influence." Thomas shook his head gently. They were wrong. The observatory grew quieter. Even the machinery seemed to listen. "The rarest thing in the universe is trust." Ethan glanced toward Lyra. She was listening with complete focus. Thomas continued. "When someone vulnerable asks for help, you learn who you really are." The words settled heavily inside the room. Ethan remembered the knock at his door. The rain. Lyra standing alone beneath the porch light. Suddenly the connection became obvious. Thomas Carter had faced the same choice decades earlier. Help first. Ask questions later. The hologram smiled again. If you found this message, then history is repeating itself. Ethan's pulse quickened. Thomas looked directly toward the camera. And if one of them came looking for you, listen carefully. The room became silent. They will tell you humanity matters because of what we build. Thomas shook his head. That is not true. The stars above the observatory seemed brighter now. Endless points of light stretching across the darkness. Humanity matters because we help strangers even when we do not fully understand them. Ethan felt every word. Thomas took a slow breath. That quality saved lives once. It may save many more someday. The hologram began fading gradually. The recording was ending. Ethan instinctively stepped forward. Wait! The word escaped before he realized it. Of course the hologram could not hear him. Yet for a brief second, it almost felt as though Thomas Carter smiled directly at his grandson. One final message appeared across the observatory displays. Coordinates. A location deep within the mountains beyond Pine Hollow. Lyra's wrist device reacted immediately. New symbols flooded the screen. Her eyes widened. Ethan. He looked toward her. What? She stared at the coordinates. Then at the stars above them. This is not a memorial. The blue light intensified throughout the observatory. Hidden systems awakened beneath the floor. Somewhere far below the mountain, ancient machinery began to move. Lyra swallowed slowly. Your grandfather did not leave us a message. She looked directly into Ethan's eyes. He left us a key. The observatory continued humming long after Lyra spoke those words. He left us a key. Ethan Carter stared at the coordinates glowing across the displays. Rows of numbers floated above the central console. Precise, deliberate, waiting. Outside the partially open dome, the stars remained impossibly clear. The night felt different now, larger, as if the mountains surrounding Pine Hollow were hiding something far older than anyone imagined. A key to what? Ethan finally asked. Lyra's eyes remained fixed on the coordinates. I do not know. That answer surprised him. You do not know? No, she looked genuinely unsettled. Whatever this location contains was hidden from my people as well. Ethan glanced toward the fading hologram of his grandfather. Then Thomas Carter knew something nobody else did. Lyra nodded slowly. That appears to be the case. The observatory lights dimmed briefly. Then a new sequence activated. The telescope above shifted position again. Additional projections appeared throughout the dome. Star maps, ancient symbols, navigation routes stretching across vast regions of space. Ethan walked closer to one display. Thousands of tiny lights connected by glowing pathways formed an enormous network. What am I looking at? Lyra joined him. Her expression changed immediately. Recognition. These are transit corridors. Ethan frowned. Transit corridors? Ancient routes used by multiple civilizations. She pointed toward a cluster near the center. Most have been inactive for generations. Ethan looked back at the coordinates. And this location connects to them somehow? Before Lyra could answer, the observatory responded for her. One section of the map illuminated. A single route expanded. The glowing line stretched outward from Earth toward distant regions of space. Then another message appeared. Preservation network status. Dormant. Ethan read it twice. Preservation network. Lyra whispered the words quietly. The phrase clearly meant something to her. What is it? Ethan asked. Lyra remained silent for several seconds. A legend. Ethan almost laughed. I am standing inside a secret observatory operated by alien technology, and somehow that is the part that sounds unbelievable. A faint smile crossed her face. Fair point. She looked back toward the display. Among my people there are stories about a network created long ago. A system designed to protect knowledge, culture, and history during periods of uncertainty. Ethan crossed his arms. Like an archive. Much larger than an archive. Her voice softened. A safeguard. The The observatory lights brightened once more. The coordinates pulsed steadily. Somewhere beneath the mountain, hidden systems continued activating. Ethan could almost feel them, like distant machinery awakening after decades of silence. Then another sound echoed through the dome. A soft chime from Lyra's wrist device. Her expression immediately darkened. "What happened?" Ethan asked. She looked at the display. "The signal I was tracking. The people searching for you?" Lyra nodded. "They are moving away." Ethan blinked. "Away?" "Yes." Confusion replaced concern. That was not the answer he expected. Lyra studied the readings carefully. "They stopped following me." "Why?" She looked around the observatory. The glowing maps, the activated systems, the coordinates. Then she slowly exhaled. "Because they found what they were looking for." Silence settled across the room. Ethan did not like where that sentence was heading. And what exactly were they looking for? Lyra met his eyes. This place. The realization hit immediately. The observatory was never merely a destination. It was part of something larger, something hidden, something important enough for multiple groups to search for. Ethan looked toward the coordinates again. The glowing numbers felt less like information now and more like an invitation, or a warning. Outside the dome, the eastern horizon showed the faintest trace of approaching dawn. Night was beginning to surrender. The stars remained visible, but a soft silver glow had appeared beyond the mountains. They had been awake for hours, yet neither felt tired anymore. Too much had changed. Too many answers waited ahead. Then the observatory delivered one final surprise. A concealed compartment opened beneath the central console. A small object emerged slowly from inside. Metallic, circular, roughly the size of a pocket watch. Ethan approached cautiously. The device looked ancient and advanced at the same time. Its surface carried symbols similar to those on Lyra's wrist display. Yet one detail stood out immediately. Engraved along the outer edge were two words: Thomas Carter. Ethan stared at them. His grandfather had held this object, touched it, protected it, hidden it. Lyra picked up the device carefully. The moment her fingers touched the surface, the coordinates on every display changed color. Bright blue light flooded the observatory. The object responded with a soft pulse. Then a single sentence appeared above the central platform. Destination confirmed. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. Lyra looked at the message, then toward the mountains visible through the open dome. The location is real. Ethan nodded. And apparently it knows we are coming. Dawn continued creeping across the horizon. The longest night of Ethan Carter's life was nearly over. Yet standing beneath the stars inside the forgotten observatory, he realized something important. The mystery was no longer about who Lyra was. It was no longer about his grandfather. It was about what waited at the end of the coordinates. And somewhere beyond the mountains, hidden since before Ethan was born, a secret was finally preparing to be found. The sun rose as Ethan Carter and Lyra followed the coordinates into the northern mountains. Morning light spilled across the forests surrounding Pine Hollow. Thin layers of mist drifted between the trees. The world looked peaceful, ordinary. Yet Ethan knew ordinary had disappeared from his life sometime around 2 o'clock that morning. The metallic device carrying his grandfather's name rested securely in his jacket pocket. Every few minutes it emitted a faint pulse. Not loud enough to hear, just enough to feel, as though it knew exactly where they were going. The route eventually left the old roads behind. They followed forgotten trails winding deeper into the wilderness. Pine trees gave way to rocky cliffs and narrow valleys rarely visited by hikers. According to every map Ethan knew, nothing important existed in this region. Yet the device continued guiding them forward with absolute certainty. By mid-morning they reached a high plateau overlooking miles of untouched forest. Lyra stopped walking. Her wrist device illuminated immediately. "We are close." Ethan looked around. Nothing stood out. No buildings. No observatory. No hidden structures. Just stone, trees, and open sky. Close to what? Lyra slowly turned toward a massive rock formation near the edge of the plateau. The formation looked natural, ancient, completely unremarkable, yet her expression changed the moment she saw it. There. Ethan followed her gaze. That? Yes. They approached carefully. As they drew nearer, Ethan noticed details he had missed from a distance. The stone surface carried faint geometric patterns. Not carved, embedded. The designs blended perfectly into the rock itself. He reached out and touched one of the lines. The metallic device inside his pocket immediately pulsed. The entire formation responded. Soft blue light spread through the stone. Ethan stepped backward instinctively. Hidden pathways illuminated beneath the rock surface. Ancient symbols appeared one after another. Then the impossible happened. Part of the cliff slowly opened. Not with noise or force, with quiet precision. Stone separated from stone. A concealed entrance emerged from the mountainside. Ethan stared. My grandfather knew about this? Lyra looked equally astonished. I do not think he merely knew about it. The entrance led downward into darkness. Blue lights illuminated a corridor beyond. Neither spoke for several seconds. The mountain had just revealed a secret hidden for decades. Perhaps longer. Finally, Ethan took a slow breath. Well, Lyra looked at him. Well, we did not come this far to stop now. The corridor descended deep beneath the plateau. Unlike the abandoned observatory, everything here remained perfectly preserved. Smooth walls reflected soft blue light. The air felt clean, fresh, as though the facility had never truly been dormant. Ethan could not stop thinking about Thomas Carter. His grandfather had known this place existed. Somehow he had protected its secret for decades without telling anyone. The realization made Ethan see him differently. Not as the old mechanic from Pine Hollow. As someone who had quietly carried a responsibility larger than himself. Eventually the corridor opened into a vast chamber. Ethan froze immediately. The room was enormous. Circular. Beautiful. Crystal structures rose from the floor like frozen light. Ancient displays floated above elegant platforms. The ceiling stretched hundreds of feet overhead. At the center stood a single monument surrounded by glowing symbols. Lyra slowly stepped forward. Her eyes widened. This cannot be real. Ethan looked at her. You recognize it? She nodded. Only from stories. Her voice had become almost reverent. The Preservation Network. The words echoed through the chamber. Ethan remembered hearing them at the observatory. What exactly is it? Lyra approached the central monument. Light responded to her presence. A safeguard created long ago. She looked around the chamber. Not for technology. Not for power. Ethan waited. Lyra touched one of the glowing surfaces gently. Thousands of images suddenly appeared around them. Civilizations, cities, worlds, countless cultures preserved in stunning detail. Histories, languages, art, music, memories, entire civilizations stored within the network. Ethan stood speechless. The scale was unimaginable. This place preserves knowledge, he whispered. More than knowledge. Lyra's eyes reflected the floating images. Identity. New displays activated throughout the chamber. Ancient records flowed across the air. Ethan watched countless civilizations appear and disappear in silent streams of light. Then one display caught his attention. Earth. A small blue world suspended among the stars. The image expanded. Human history appeared. Moments of discovery, cooperation, exploration, acts of kindness, ordinary people helping one another. The network had preserved those moments too. Ethan frowned. Why these? Lyra looked toward the display. Then a realization crossed her face. A realization so powerful it left her completely silent. No, she whispered. Ethan turned toward her. What? She stared at the human records. I understand now. Understand what? Her eyes filled with amazement. Why they sent me. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. This was it. The answer she had been searching for. Lyra looked directly at him. The stories were wrong. The chamber continued glowing around them. thousands of preserved histories floating in the air. For generations, we believed humanity was important because your species survived impossible challenges. Ethan remained silent. Lyra slowly shook her head. That was never the reason. She looked at the image of Thomas Carter now appearing among the preserved records. One ordinary man helping strangers he did not understand. One simple act echoing across decades, across worlds, across civilizations. Lyra smiled softly. Humanity was important because you never needed a reason to help. The chamber remained filled with floating histories long after Lyra spoke those words. Humanity was important because you never needed a reason to help. Ethan Carter stood beneath the glowing displays and watched countless memories drift through the air like living stars. Acts of courage, acts of kindness, small moments most people would never consider important enough to remember. Yet the Preservation Network had remembered all of them. Somewhere among those countless records was a mechanic from Pine Hollow who had opened his door to strangers. And because of that simple choice, an entire chain of events had survived across generations. Lyra slowly approached the central monument. The crystal structure responded immediately. Light flowed upward through its surface. New symbols appeared. The chamber seemed to recognize her presence. For several seconds she simply stood there, silent and thoughtful. Then she looked toward Ethan. I know what I must do now. Ethan nodded slowly. He had suspected that moment was coming. You have to go back. Lyra smiled softly. Yes. The answer carried both relief and sadness. The Preservation Network had been found. The mystery was solved. The reason for her journey had finally become clear. Yet somehow the idea of saying goodbye felt heavier than any secret hidden beneath the mountains. The monument emitted a gentle tone. Above them, a new projection appeared. Not a map, not coordinates. A message, written in symbols that gradually translated themselves into English. Preservation Network restored. Historical continuity secured. Ethan read the words twice. Then another line appeared beneath them. Recognition granted to humanity. Lyra looked up at the message. Her silver eyes reflected the light. This has never happened before. Ethan glanced toward her. What does it mean? It means the network has acknowledged your species directly. She laughed softly in disbelief. I do not think anyone expected that. Ethan looked around the vast chamber one last time. He understood now why his grandfather had protected the secret. Not because it was powerful. Not because it was valuable. Because it preserved something worth remembering. The best parts of every civilization. The moments that proved people could choose compassion over fear. Suddenly the monument brightened. A circle of light formed at its center. Lyra's wrist device synchronized immediately. The chamber responded with a low harmonious hum. Ethan already knew what it was. A way home. Lyra stepped toward it slowly. Neither rushed the moment. Neither wanted to. When I arrived at your house, she said quietly, I thought I was searching for answers. Ethan smiled. And, Lyra looked at him. I found them. The chamber glowed warmly around them. Morning sunlight filtered through hidden openings high above the mountain. The first full light of day had finally arrived. Your grandfather changed history, Lyra continued. Not because he was extraordinary. Ethan remembered the hologram in the observatory. The smile. The familiar voice. He would have liked hearing that. Lyra nodded. Because he already knew it. For a moment neither spoke. The silence felt comfortable. Honest. Like two friends sharing the end of a very long conversation. Then Lyra stepped closer and placed a small object into Ethan's hand. The metallic device bearing Thomas Carter's name. This belongs with your family. Ethan looked down at it. Are you sure? Very. Her smile returned. It completed its purpose. The circle of light behind her grew brighter. Ethan felt the weight of the device in his palm. A legacy passed from one generation to another. Not wealth, not fame, just a reminder that kindness mattered. Sometimes more than anyone realized. Lyra took one final look around the chamber. Then at Ethan. Thank you. Ethan laughed softly. For what? For opening the door. The simplicity of the answer made him smile. Of all the impossible events that had unfolded, everything truly had started with that one decision. Open the door. Help first. Ask questions later. Lyra stepped into the light. The chamber responded with a gentle pulse. The glow surrounded her completely. For a brief moment she seemed made of starlight itself. Then she was gone. Silence returned. Ethan stood alone beneath the restored network. Yet he did not feel alone. Not really. The chamber remained illuminated. The preserved histories continued drifting through the air. Humanity's story among them. A small world, an ordinary species, remembered not for power, but for compassion. Hours later, Ethan stood outside the mountain entrance watching the sun rise fully above Pine Hollow. Golden light spilled across the forests below. Birds moved through the morning air. Everything looked exactly the same as it had the day before. Yet everything felt different. He reached into his pocket and touched the device his grandfather had left behind. Above him, the sky stretched endlessly toward distant stars hidden beyond daylight. Somewhere out there, Lyra was returning home. Somewhere out there, civilizations remembered a choice made by an ordinary man. Ethan looked toward the horizon and smiled. His grandfather had been right all along. The rarest thing in the universe was not power. It was trust. And sometimes the smallest act of kindness could travel farther than the stars themselves.